Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today for Simon Says Stamp with a couple of rainbow in the round cards to share with you featuring new stamps, dies, and stencils from the Simon Says Stamp Send Happiness Release. I absolutely loved the look of the new in the round stencil, and I'm going to pair it with some fun die cut and stamped sentiments for a very easy yet eye-catching background. We're going to start with the in the round stencil. I used a little pixie spray on the back of the stencil to hold it down in place over a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch background. And I'm going to center it as close to the center of my cardstock as possible. And that pixie spray will help hold it down, hold it in place while I ink it up with some dye inks from my stash. We're going to start with a little Simon Says Stamp lipstick red ink. And I purposely started a little lighter than I wanted, especially for this first one. Both backgrounds are created exactly the same, just to kind of get my feel for how heavy a hand I wanted to use for the stenciling. And there will be some overlap of color as we transition from one color to another. I did absolutely no masking here, so it's super quick and easy background that is very effective. Next, we're using some Simon Says Stamp Orange Slush, and this is going to blend beautifully into that lipstick red. And I have all of my ink brushes here in a new to me holder that I did purchase from Simon Says Stamp. I have added this in the supplies down below the video here on YouTube, as well as linked it with a thumbnail on my blog post that coordinates with this video. So if you're interested in at all in that, plus I have kind of switched my brushes, switched my brushes to all of this style, which I really like. It works really great for kind of knowing these brushes I can use with dye inks. And then I have a whole nother set. I actually bought 2 of these brush holders, and those are for my Distress Oxide inks. The green color I used was Lawn Fawn Cilantro ink, and then I'm using Lawn Fawn Forget Me Not, and finally Lawn Fawn Blue Jay. So a little bit of a non-traditional rainbow here, but I really love how this turned out. And these blending brushes are awesome. These are the Simon Says Stamp branded ones. I just bought a whole bunch of these just to keep it consistent in my craft room, and it's working out fantastic. I'm going to peel away my stencil then, and I am left with this gorgeous background. Now off camera, I did die cut the brand new Chunky Happy dies, and then I die cut it from several colors of cardstock. If you don't want to waste a bunch of different colors of cardstock, I actually use scraps, and I would just kind of position the die to die cut a letter at a time. I didn't end up with a ton of extra that way, and I was able to use up some scraps of cardstock. If you wanted to create a whole set of 5 cards just like this, you could just switch the order of the letters if you go ahead and die cut the whole thing. So that would be a really quick and easy way to do multiple cards at one time, which I am a huge fan of as well. So now that I have all of my components, I've got a little white outline, a black shadow, and then the colorful letters for the inlay, I'm going to stamp a sentiment from the Simon Says Stamp Happy Days stamp set. And I decided to stamp the phrase, "You make me." There are lots of different ways to mix and match the word happy with sentiments from this stamp set, which I always particularly love. There's like an anniversary greeting, so you could make this an anniversary card, you know, all kinds of things. So really, really a great stamp set there as well. I'm going to go ahead and stamp that with clear embossing ink on some black licorice cardstock, heat set with white embossing powder. When this has cooled enough to the touch that it's not going to smear, I'm going to buff away that excess powder with a microfiber cloth. And then we are going to die cut this with a nested banners die. And I'm actually going to use one of the nested banners dies that has the round edge, but it's a lot longer than what I actually want for my sentiment. A great way to shorten this up is to line it up with one side of the sentiment, run it through your die cutting machine, and then go ahead and take your banner, flip it, and line up the other side with the edge you've already die cut inside the die, and run it through again. And that's going to just shorten the die up. And I'm going to show you that here. So maybe you get a little bit better idea of what I'm talking about, how the die cut label is a little shorter than the die itself. This is my favorite way to shorten something and customize it so that it really fits the project. And you can see how much I cut off there. I left it just so you could kind of see just exactly how much I actually did cut off. We are ready to put it all together. These cards really came together so fast. So let's start with putting a little foam tape on the back of our banner greeting. I love these little thin strips. And then we are going to go ahead and take our happy, and we are going to glue down the outline first. This was die cut from smooth white cardstock, and then we're going to start inlaying all the colorful letters. The cardstock colors I'm using here today, I am using Simon Says Stamp Lipstick Red cardstock, Hero Arts Papaya cardstock, Lawn Fawn Cilantro, Moonstone, and Blue Jay cardstock. After I have that outline in place, I'm just going to put a couple of acrylic blocks on top to help hold that down. You'll also notice I have this fine tip applicator on my Ranger Multi-Matte Medium. This is my very favorite way to glue things down because that little teeny tiny nozzle is only going to put out a thin stream of glue, which works great for any time you're working with something that's a little more intricate. I made sure to keep all of those little inside layering pieces. You're going to watch here as I'm adding all of those in. It really makes the title or the sentiment here pop. Next, we've got our cilantro letter P. One thing that I noticed as I was working on this is I really felt like the outline, I wanted it to be a little more prominent. And I contemplated leaving it one layer, and it wasn't really until I'm almost finished with the card that I chose to go ahead and add another outline on top of the first to give it a little bit more depth and dimension. So here is the Moonstone cardstock, and I am continuously using the acrylic blocks to help hold these down and hold them flat until that glue dries. The embellishment wand works fantastic for picking up any of these little pieces and kind of helping guide them into place. And then we're going to flip it over and put foam adhesive on the back of the chunky happy sentiment as well, so we can pop it up as well as that little strip. And I'm playing around with the placement. So I'm going to adhere that down, and then I chose to shift my little sentiment strip on both cards one way or the other. So for the happy card, it's going to be shifted kind of over to the left, up above, and on the love you card, it'll be shifted over to the right, below the die cut sentiment. The final thing we're going to do for our card today is add some coordinating Pretty Pink Posh jewels to the In the Round stencil dots. I just went color by color, and I would put little dabs of glue and pop jewels into those sections, and you're going to be, or pardon me, you're going to end up with this great background that is a rainbow of inked circles that also have the little sparkly gemstone jewels in them. It looks so cool, especially in real life when you get that sparkle, and it adds just the right amount of embellishment. It keeps these cards a little bit more on the simple side, but really makes them pop. The colors I am using, so over the red, I'm using Raspberry Jewels. Over orange, I actually didn't have orange jewels. So I used the Pretty Pink Posh Buttercream Jewels, which I think worked really nice and kind of pull in a touch of yellow since I'm not really using yellow ink or cardstock here for my rainbow card. The light green here is the Spring Green Jewels. And then the light blue is Sea Glass Pretty Pink Posh Jewels. And our dark blue is going to be Blue Lagoon. And I'm using that embellishment wand again to pick them up and pop them in place. I would work section by section, adding dots of glue to like all of the green, and then add green gemstones. Add little dabs of glue to all of the light blue and add the sea glass jewels, and so on and so forth. And that way I just kind of worked section by section. And you can see if there's any little holes to fill if you want to. Here is that second outline that I was talking about a little earlier in the video that I felt like the title needed just to kind of help make it a little more prominent and stand out a little bit more. And I'll put some acrylic blocks on that for it to dry before we go ahead and glue this entire panel to a white side fold card base. And not forgetting to add all those little inside pieces to the A and the letter P's. Now we're going to do the exact same inking for the second card. You could choose to do a solid color. You can ink it in lots and lots of different ways. You can apply paste through this. Just so many different things that you can do with a stencil. I opted to do the exact same design for today to show you how this looks with two completely different sentiments, but the same style. Because I felt like the chunky Love You is really going to work well with this same kind of look. Plus, I think this makes it a great card, maybe even to give to a guy. A lot of times I think the Love You cards tend to be a little more frilly and girly, if you will. And while the gemstones probably add a little bit of sparkle and bling to this, the overall design, and maybe you want to even leave the jewels off, I think it could totally work if you wanted to give it to a guy. I hadn't cleaned the stencil yet, so and I didn't have to apply more pixie spray to it. It still was plenty sticky, so I just placed it over another 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch background. I'm applying those same ink colors through the stencil. And then we'll remove it, and off camera I die cut all of the letters and outline and shadow for the chunky Love You, just like I did for the chunky Happy. Now, because these are 2 words and there's more letters, there will be a repetition of a couple of the colors in the letters, so a couple of oranges and a couple of reds, but that's totally cool. It doesn't matter. We are going to be using the sentiment So Very Much from the Happy Days stamp set, the same stamp set we used for the last card. This one has a great little outline box around it. You could trim this into a strip with your paper trimmer or scissors if you want to. I've talked about this before, but the nested banners that I used for the previous card for the strip and the Simon Says Stamp Sentiment labels are 2 of my very favorite basics die sets. So I used one of the banners from the sentiment labels to die cut that into a short little strip, so it's just perfectly die cut. There's just something about that die cut edge that is so much different than your paper trimmer, and I really, really love it. So I went ahead and did that for my strip. We're going to inlay all of our letters just like we did for the last card. I'm going to do 2 white die cut outlines for this one. Since I already knew I liked that look, I went ahead and did that for this card. And we will pop it up with foam adhesive back behind that shadow so that it stands out from our background a little bit. And then, like I mentioned, this one, the extra stamped phrase goes underneath the die cut sentiment, and I'm just going to kind of shift it over so that it's underneath the O and U in the word you. And then we're going to place all of the same great little pretty pink posh jewels around the dots on the background of this card as well. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video showcasing some fun ideas to use with new products from the Simon Says Stamp Send Happiness Release. The supplies I use to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Simon Says stamps, dies, and other products that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.